You're a great host.
Oh, thank you very much. Oh, that's so kind. Maya, are you ready? I think we're just going to get right into it. I want to give the people what they want.
Yeah, let's do
All
it.
right,
Yeah.
well, let's do it. Let's do it. So, folks, we are here today to celebrate the beautiful release of Judas and Suicide. And with no more shenanigans, I'm going to introduce our feature for this evening, Maya Williams. Maya Williams, she is a religious, Black, multiracial, non-binary suicide survivor who is currently the 7th Poet Laureate of Portland, Maine, from July 2021 to July 2024. No big deal. A has published poems in venues such as the Portland Press Herald, the Cortland Review, FreezeRay, Indianapolis Review, Occulum, glitterMOB, Littoral Books, Black Table Arts, and more. Their debut poetry collection, Judas and Suicide, is published, has been released this month today by Game Over Books, and their second collection, Refused a Second Date, will be published October 2023. She has received residencies from Sundress Academy for the Arts, Voices of Our Nation Arts Foundation, the For Us by Us Fund's Word of Fire Retreat, Hewnoaks Artist Colony, and The Watering Hole. Maya has one of 3 artists of color selected to represent Maine in the Kennedy Center's Arts Across America series in 2020, and was listed as one of the Advocates Champions of Pride in 2022. Follow more of their work and invite them to read or facilitate a workshop at mayawilliamspoet.com. And without further ado, everybody, please give a warm welcome to Maya.
I'm so happy y'all are here. I love y'all very much. Can folks hear me okay? Okay, beautiful. Amazing. In the beginning, God was bored, lonely, and loving enough to allow himself to pull the glittery Big Bang from his sleeve. Lucifer was bored too, but while not too far from God, he liked the loneliness of the darkness. God said, "Let there be light," when he created the day and proclaimed it good. Lucifer thought his name provided enough light. On the day God created Adam, Lucifer questioned his own enoughness. When God did not want man to be alone and made a companion for Adam, Lucifer became jealous, bitter. When Adam and Eve were kicked out of Eden, Lucifer did not expect to be cursed too, to be alone, and God having more than enough friends. I'll show him, thought Lucifer. On the 12th day, Lucifer changed his name to Satan and proclaimed it good. On the 1096th day, Satan challenged God to show how hopeless humans are through Job, proved to him that slinging out creation was never a good idea. God, righteously cocky, said, "Bet." God won, and it was good. Satan rubbed his hands together and got to work. Try again. On the 260,666th day, Satan created white supremacy, the DSM, transphobia, continued to trick scattered humans into believing any room for sorrow becomes a room for damnation. Sitting back on his recliner engulfed by flames, he enjoyed witnessing humans shout at God from afar. Satan's favorite saying humans created for him is, "The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was making the world believe he didn't exist." On the trillionth day, Satan continues to destroy and confuse humans to get that original loneliness back, and he finds it oh so good. Thank you. That's the first poem. Oh my gosh. The rest of the poems I'll be reading during the time we have together include content around religious related trauma, suicidality, suicide in entertainment media, suicide in the media. So please take care of yourselves as needed, friends. You are not obligated to sit all uncomfortable when you could just leave and come back. Or if you need to leave and not come back, that is also fine. Christina, I love you. No, you are perfect. You are so perfect. Next poem is called Judas Suicide, and God doesn't give you any more than you can handle, after Rach Jackson. And for folks who got their books, you can see this landscape here. And it's not the only poem in landscape form. Very happy about it. Shout out to Paige Lewis, who was like, make sure this poem is earlier in the collection. And before each of these particular poems, there's an epigraph that includes a Bible verse. I'll read the epigraph first, and then I'll read the poem whenever things like that come up. So now, Lord, kill me instead, because I would rather die than live. The book of Jonah, chapter 4, verse 3. God has given Jonah a lot that he couldn't handle. That's why when he had to go to Nineveh, he tried his best to avoid it. God has given me a lot that I couldn't handle. That's why when I had to go to therapy, I tried my best to avoid it. God has given Jonah a lot he couldn't handle. That's why he thought to end his life before the great fish could. God has given me a lot I couldn't handle. That's why I thought to end my life before the great fish called life could. God has given Jonah a lot he couldn't handle. That's why when the people of Nineveh wouldn't listen, he questioned why he didn't avoid them. God has given me a lot I couldn't handle. That's why when the people of my family wouldn't listen, I questioned why I didn't avoid them. God has given Jonah a lot he couldn't handle. That's why he thought of ending his life again after the great fish couldn't. God has given me a lot that I couldn't handle. That's why I thought of ending my life again after the great fish called life couldn't. God allowed our fish to swallow us whole. This next one is called Curses Suicide, and just pray about it. So the unclean spirits came out and went into the pigs. Then the herd rushed down the steep slope into the lake, and about 2,000 were drowned in the lake. The book of Mark, chapter 5, verse 13. I jump off and hold my breath. There on the hillside, a great herd of pigs was feeding. My father asks, "Can you focus?" And the demonic spirits begged him, "On having fun today at the lake house, there is trouble in your spirit. Send us into the pigs, let us enter them." Bubbles rev through my nose as I sink. My father says, "You can't change the past." Jesus gave them permission. He never says that when I describe a positive memory to him. So the unclean spirits came out and went into the pigs. I want to keep myself from floating up. I try to hold it all in so the lake can swallow me. Then the herd rushed down the steep slope into the lake. The coward in me returns for air. My dad affirms, curses can be broken. Just pray about it. I did not conjure my depression. I do not tell him there is little to no correlation between prayer and wellness. I ask if we can go swimming again tomorrow afternoon, and about 2,000 were drowned in the lake. Thanks, y'all. This next one, so in the book, they're all in like shorter, they're all like shorter poems all across the collection, but tonight, I'm gonna read them all at once, and they're the same title. If you stop crying, it won't hurt as much. It is another Saturday night when Pour Me a Shot of Whiskey plays on my grandmother's stereo as she, my mother, my aunt, my uncle, and my play cousins are drinking in the dining room. 8-year-old me runs to the dining room crying from another headache. My aunt rushes me to the shower and runs out for Advil to help me feel better. My aunt is the first to teach me that the more I cried, the more it would hurt. It is summer vacation, and it is time to move boxes out of our blue house in Charlotte and into a white U-Haul for a red brick house in Greensboro. 15-year-old me feels the sweat and heavy breath hold my body captive. I continue to rush as I lift, walk, drop, repeat with as much helpful precision as I can, despite the tears constantly dripping down my face. My stepdad and my mother laugh at me. They tell me that if I stop crying, my body wouldn't hurt as much. It is early fall, and 19-year-old me and my boyfriend sit on my long, thin dorm bed. My poster of a rainbow-painted bird has better eye contact with him than I do. My boyfriend tells me to stop being manipulative with my tears. I try to stop crying so his words won't hurt as much. It is another Monday night when my computer screen glows with my therapist giving me eye contact through her red rectangular glasses. 25-year-old me uncrosses their legs and faces her. My therapist reminds me how I need to let her know what's coming up for me, to name my needs. The tears make my eyes fucking hurt. My chest feels lifted. Thank you. This next poem, oh, wow. Time is speeding up, so I'm gonna skip to a different poem. It hurts a lot more when the reports are right. I attempted suicide when I was 15. Suicide rates rise in a generation of Black youth feels like a punch in the gut. Higher prevalence of sexual assault amongst transgender and non-binary adolescents feels like a kick in the cunt. LGBTQ+ rates of suicide, especially amongst youth, are disproportionately higher than cisgender heterosexual individuals. Feels like a personal attack. But when I read that Black people's suicide rate is still lower than the overall population's because of faith-based outreach, I wonder, how many of us are pressured into leaving our questions unanswered? How many of us are pressured into leaving our healing underwhelmed? How many of us are pressured into staying alive quietly? How many of us are pressured into staying alive than not? Thank you. I'm peeping at the chat for a minute. Oh my God. Y'all are so kind. This next poem is the title poem of the collection. Judas and Suicide. So Judas threw the silver coins into the temple and left. Then he went out and hanged himself. The book of Matthew, chapter 27, verses 3-5. My grandmother thought women with mental illnesses in our family were like Judas. Judas, cowardly, betrayer of the disciples, betrayer of Jesus, hanged himself not for being sorry, but to escape blame. Jesus died for our sins, while Judas died by his. Despite clear scripture of Judas's death, there are blurred lines in between where his death is viewed as a sin, like his duplicity. He killed Jesus and himself. Thou shalt not kill, right? My cousin has bipolar disorder. After her attempt, my grandmother thought she was cowardly betrayer of the family, betrayer of my grandmother, took pills as a way out. I have obsessive compulsive disorder. I mention my attempt. My grandmother says I'm not like my cousin, a problem child, always going through something, craving her big escape. I have it together, always keeping busy. I stay away from making mistakes. I ask, are you sure? My grandmother doesn't understand. She thought things were going well for me. Why would I want to hurt her by hurting myself like that? We didn't think of our attempts as a way to escape our grandmother or our family. We thought of our attempts as a way for our family to escape us. We thought it was the most selfless gift we could give. Jesus taught us selflessness, not Judas. That poem took like, oh my God, it took three years to write, and it's wild because this book took 3 years to write. And yeah, oh yeah, I'm peeping at the chat. Thank you. This next one called Samson and Suicide. And this poem was interesting to write because not everyone considers his narrative in the Bible as a suicide, because it's framed as like, oh, but he regains his strength and he kills the Philistines. Isn't that cool? And I have complicated feelings about that. Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." He pushed hard, and the temple collapsed on the rulers and all the people in it. He killed many more people in his death than he had killed during his life. The book of Judges, chapter 16, verse 30. From the moment Samson had his hair cut, he let go of his strength, his sheets, his lion carcass trophy, his indulgence in honey, his riddles, his ex's tears, his kingdom, his team of fellow soldiers, his parents' respect, his ropes, his shackles. He took people with him and was praised for it. I thought that cutting my hair would help me let go. I refused to take anyone with me. Thank you. This next one I got to read on the Line Break podcast. And also reading it during that podcast interview made me realize how much I love this poem. And I more so love this poem because of the title. But I'm excited to read it. The devil is concerned with more pressing matters than my mental health issues. I won't deny. He sure has been the ghostwriter of most of the DSM, transforming transness into evil, corrupt contagion, softening the blow of racism by labeling it aimless. I won't lie. A theologian once described Jesus as his favorite ex-boyfriend who checks in. I thought my least favorite was the devil, with his unwelcome arrival in spirit. But he is way too busy to be the spirit that possesses me. The devil has an apocalypse to plan, filled with red-orange flames from the arrows of trusty horsemen, a supremacist army with desire for hell's manifest destiny, eugenic colonial power. He has other curses to conjure that have zero correlation with mental illness. Emotions do not equate an ailment. There's a difference between the thoughts I can control and the thoughts I cannot. Yes, pray for me. Only pray the right one next time. Got 3 more poems for y'all. And also thank you, MJ, for sending me your requests, because it's very telling, the type of poems I often get asked to read, and this poem is one of them. Convince us to stay. What most people don't understand about suicidal ideation is how hella convinced we have to be to stay on this earth. Some days even want to stay. It's not enough to tell us we'll burden someone if we leave, as often as we think we'll burden someone if we stay. Ideation is the double-edged sword we never asked for. Then again, we never asked to be alive either. Ideation is the pendulum that swings from one alternate universe of darkness to another. Convince us of an alternate universe of light that exists out there. With less cliches this time, with more cliches we can be proud of, with natural prayers, with no empty prayers at all. Convince us of a better future ahead without the pressure of having to fucking think of one. Convince us of possibilities without providing us fucking barriers in the same breath. Hear us. Commend us for our survival without us having to experience the threat of a disappearance in the first place. Need us. No, I mean, really, need us. Not because it'll make you feel better, because it'll make all of us feel better. No, I mean, really, feel better. Like freedom of life without giving compensation for saving it after failed attempts. Like summer rains being the occasional cleanse we desire with its liveliness within the gray. Like being so fucking present, being a blessed gift in of itself, only no one has to wrap or rewrap it for us. Mental illness unravels like a motherfucker. Convince us of the belief that we can wrap and rewrap it ourselves. Thank you. What are you watching now? And this one includes an epigraph from the show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Valencia says, Rebecca, please, promise me you'll never do it again. And Rebecca, I would love to promise you that. I'd love to promise you all that, but I can't. Gabrielle Ruiz and Rachel Bloom, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Season 3, Episode 6. I didn't see this soon enough on television. The concept of healing overnight is a band-aid. Until this scene landed in my face. As much as I love my family, I don't owe them pinky promises when it comes to my mental health. Honesty has to be much healthier than hope. No one ever wants their loved one to die by suicide. We make shooting star 11/11 birthday wishes and prayers for promises of livelihood and happiness for them to face. Through that effort, we don't talk enough about what makes us scared. I didn't tell them how much I wanted to die even after my attempt of suicide. Black people have the lowest rates of suicidal deaths, but we are still scared of how to stay alive without the pressure. Scared because of the many deaths we had before, including what isn't shown on television. Sometimes, the unexpected, remarkable gift of television helps us see what's scary. It's a form of hope we need. Consider this permission to not make promises. Consider this permission to talk about suicide. Consider this permission to crave this on television. Got one more. And every time I'm at a reading of some sort, and every time I include this in my set list, I always refer to this poem as the happy suicide poem. And I promise it always makes sense after I read it. Anyways. Paul's response to his jailer's attempted suicide after Lindsay Young. When the jailer woke up and saw the doors of the prison standing open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself because he assumed the prisoners had escaped. The Book of Acts, chapter 16, verse 27. Hey, look at me, man. I can't stop you from what you want to do or whatever thoughts emerge in your head. I can tell you that it is not your fault. You don't have to be trapped here anymore. Hey, look at me, man. There is a light in these cavernous tunnels of ours. Fuck the end of it, because there's no end for us to get to. Hey, look at me, man. How about we try living? Thank you very much.
Please give it up for Maya, everybody. Like, what an incredible reading. Seriously, this has been amazing, and this book right here is a game changer. I know a lot of you probably already have this. I hope gotten your hands on your copy because this is great. So right now I want to switch gears since we just had this awesome reading. I want to talk to you, Maya, a little bit about the book and do a little Q&A. So I have some questions that I've drawn up, but I also want to encourage folks that are here with us today, if you have anything that you'd like to ask the author, anything that you felt inspired by or were thinking about during the course of the reading tonight, please throw those questions in the chat and I'm going to be more than happy to ask them. So with that, I kind of want to, I'm like, oh, where do I want to start? So this is always like the hardest part. I think I'm going to start with some general questions overall about the structure. Mainly with the book, what you have done is you've kind of siloed everything into these different arcs, right? You have 6 arcs overall. You have the curse, the commit, the watch, forgive, stay, and alive. And so I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit more about how you came to define your arcs by those terms and how then you went about deciding where poems fit narratively, right?
Yeah.
For the rest of the book.
Yeah, I know that I definitely wanted the poems that center on a piece of scripture to be somewhat of the centerpiece of the collection. But it's actually thanks to my lovely editor Sarah May helping me process yes, that's great, and I get that, but what are the main topics at hand as far as how to emphasize those arcs in the collection. So all credit goes to Sarah May there.
Good editors, honestly. Shout out to Sarah May and shout out to all the good editors out there, because really game changers sometimes, right? Absolutely. That's great. So can you talk to me a little bit about, I want to focus on one of the last poems that you read, which is the What Are You Watching Now? And I think one of the things that for me, it gravitated toward that is, besides watching a little bit of that show myself, but just I'm a big media person. I'm like a big, TV and film person. And so it's hard to see sometimes really good depictions of mental health or suicide ideation and, support displayed in media. So I'm wondering, because you do some stuff as well in terms of film reviews, blogs and stuff like that. Obviously, there's an influence here in your poems. And so I was wondering if you could talk about some of your favorite pieces of media, and that could be anything. It could be television, it could be games, it could be what have you, that do properly portray the experience of living with either mental illness or some type of neurodivergence. So what are some things that you go yes, this is what I want to continue to see, what you expressed in that poem?
Yeah, absolutely. Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is definitely one of them. I have a poem in the collection about the film Dead Poets Society. As far as it portraying it honestly, and I actually an interview recently with the Black Girl Film podcast, and we talked about the movie The Secret Life of Bees. It's based on the book by Sumont Kidd, and talked about how for Black folks in particular, it's often one of the first portrayals of suicide that isn't exploitative, that isn't trying to frame it in a way where it's like, oh look, she was doomed from the start, sort of thing. And it's like, well, actually she had a very loving community around her and she still chose to. And we talk a little bit about that, and that episode gets released I think either later this week or next week at the time of this recording.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually going off of that a little bit in terms of the community, I think that's what's so compelling about the Convince Us poem, right? Is it really is like deeply examining, I think, a lot of the misconceptions people have about trying to talk to somebody that is experiencing this. And so I want to ask you in that regard, because usually it is this kind of lens of like, oh, think of who you might be hurting in your community if you decide to do this. And it's like, that's the wrong place to be like putting this. And so I'm curious for you, what are the biggest misconceptions that you see when it comes to suicidal ideation awareness and support? Like, what do you wish people could see and then change in terms of how they act, right? Or how they try to respond and support somebody that's going through this?
I wish more people recognize how systemic it is. I wish that more people would recognize that not every person who chooses to die by suicide necessarily has a mental health diagnosis. And that's because that's where the influence of Convince Us to Stay comes from, right? Because it's like here are all these reasons for why I shouldn't. Like, all of these systems are literally telling me to die. What other alternative is there? And like, as far as like, you gotta convince me better. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And not from a place that you think is selfless, but it's actually very selfish, right? Because that's what I always think of too. It's like, no, you're making it worse in a way, right? Because then it's like, oh, I'm making people feel bad, even better. I gotta go. So I totally agree 100%. And a follow-up to that, so what do you hope at the end of the day? And this is something that I ask pretty much every author, because I'm always curious, because at the end of the day, it is your work, it is your book, but once you put it out there, people are going to take and read what they want from this. So as an author, what do you hope are some of the biggest learning moments or experiences or takeaways that a reader could get from this? What do you hope they could get from this?
Yeah, I hope that the reader takes away this like more of an uplifted desire to have grace for themselves. For one thing. And also, like, I will say, I don't want folks walking away from like reading the collection and thinking like wow, your grandma sounds awful, your dad sounds awful, because it's like no, they were communicating with me with the only tools that they had at the time. And of course, at the same time, I can't control how what people think of the book. I can't control people's thoughts around the book. But I do want to name like how much love is present, especially through the If You Stop Crying It Won't Hurt As Much poems. Like you see how all of it is laced with love and good intentions from family members, and how it's like they were not wrong. Like it physically hurt less, right? But it's just a matter of like, how do we have better tools to actually process like how crying can be helpful amidst the pain. It's going to hurt before it gets better.
Absolutely. And thank you, Kelly Sue. I totally agree. That was one of the lines I took away too, is that I hope the reader takes an uplifted desire to have grace for themselves. Yeah, and I hope they do too, because like that's what this book does. And a follow or a different question, I want to kind of talk a little bit about this incredible cover that was done by Mice, right? This really pops. This is some fresh, like these colors. I love this. This is very different from what we've done for some of our books in the past. And so I'm curious if you would talk a little bit about what this cover process was like for you, how you talked about, you know, Catherine, how did you land upon the image for this book that you got here?
Oh my gosh. Because so Catherine has been rooting for this book since day one. So that's one reason why I wanted them to do the cover. And also they're also an incredible poet. So I
Also
knew
up
that.
in Maine, Deer Isle representing.
Yes, Maine Literary Award nominee Catherine Weiss. They're also coming to a book launch event of mine on May 31st at Mechanics Hall in Portland for in-person folks who want to attend, and there will be a Zoom link too for folks who can attend in person. But anyways, Catherine had asked, what are some ideas that you have, and to make it more concise, the long email that I sent.
For
I
sure.
I was thinking of like the three central images I was thinking of were tears, pills, because there are poems in the collection about medication, um, and and I did not want religious iconography, but I did want to give Catherine the opportunity to explore any images from the stories.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Um, and then there came the I'm glad the tears won because the cover looks beautiful. and I keep getting very kind words about the cover, as if I did it, but I have to be like, no, Catherine Weiss designed the cover.
Oh, no, Calvin designed the cover, but if there was no book, if there was no words to inspire, you know, we wouldn't be here, right? I'm just saying. I want to throw it out one more time. If anybody in the chat right now has any questions, please throw them in there now. Forever hold your peace, because otherwise I'm gonna wrap it up and you won't get your opportunity.
I'm very curious to hear from people.
Don't be shy. Come on. How is Maya such an amazing poet? That is a question from Kay Bancroft. That is a perfect question. How did this happen? Inquiring minds want to know.
I cannot with you. Oh my god. That number one, that is Kate, that is a great question. That is also a subjective question. So I'm gonna
I think factual evidence to back this up.
I'm just gonna answer it with oh, Milena. Oh.
Adrian also has a question too, so I want to throw this out there as well.
Yeah.
What were ways that you practice self-care over the process of making this collection? I think that's a wonderful.
That is a wonderful question. Yeah. Um, and you know what? It's connected to Kay's question, because the answer to Kay's question, years of practice. But the answer to this particular question about self-care, getting the opportunity to make sure I take breaks from writing certain poems, and making sure that I've processed whatever I'm writing about in therapy first before I make a decision of like whether or not I want to publish a piece. I'm very happy that more poets in more recent times are saying the phrase, "Hey, write from the scar, not the wound." That still resonates with me, and also it's been really nice having a lot of loved ones read the poems and give me their feedback. Um, Shout out to Josh for bearing with how long my gratitude page was. Thank you. I love you.
Like how I love. There's a lot of people who think. Kay's got another follow-up here. What did you read that fed and carried you while you wrote this collection?
Ooh, I love this question. Um, always return to Anis Mojgani's In the Pockets of Small Gods. It is my favorite poetry collection of all time. He does such a skillful job of talking about grief, particularly when it comes to losing someone to suicide, as well as navigating your own suicidal ideation in the midst of that. And also I love reading from poets who are able to distinguish faith in their work. I know that Anis Mojgani is a Baha'i poet, so I'm very much I like to gravitate towards that. Kaveh Akbar's Calling a Wolf a Wolf, Rach Jackson's Even the Saints Audition. Very grateful that Rach took the time to blurb my book. I will be forever grateful for that. Lindsay Young's Salt to Taste in Your Absence.
Awesome. That's a wonderful list. Well, no, folks. That's all we got. That's all she wrote.
Really?
I think those are all our questions.
Thank you all so much. Oh my goodness. Oh no, wait. Wait, this is a great question.
At the buzzer.
I want to answer this question.
Yeah, what made you reach out to Allison?
Yes. And number one, very happy to know I'm not the only author who loves a good acknowledgement section. Thank you. And also thank you for this question about Allison. I wanted to reach out to Allison Raskin because she was a very formative figure in my life personally when it's come to her writings about OCD and mental health, especially because I love how she uses humor to describe how hard being alive is. And I've been a fan of her work since I was early on in college. And then I had sent an email, and at first I'm thinking like well she might say no, but like I'm gonna reach out. And then luckily she said yes, and she asked me to be on her Emotional Sport Lady podcast last year to talk about the book, and she's gonna come to my reading at Book Soup in LA, and I'm very excited about that. So I'll have the opportunity to meet her in person. Yeah, she's just an incredible advocate and an incredible writer and podcaster. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I guess I'll ask one more time. Is there any more questions before I log and say that we're good? Okay, so on that note, that's our show, folks. Thank you so much for coming out and celebrating this wonderful book with us, celebrating Maya Williams, this wonderful poet, artist, and our author. It's been a great time. Thank you for your questions. Yes, congratulations, Maya.
Thank you all so much.
We hope you had a good time.